Good evening, I'm Deborah Knight, coming to you from Parliament House in Canberra. Tonight, Julia Gillard makes history, sworn in as our first female Prime Minister.
I offer you my very warmest congratulations on this historic day for our country, and I wish you well. Thank you.
Straight down to business, the new PM's pledge to the people of Australia.
There will be some days I delight you. There may be some days I disappoint you. On every day, I will be working my absolute hardest for you.
Ambushed by his party, an emotional Kevin Rudd concedes defeat.
I hope I've been able to demonstrate to you that this has been a very busy 2.5 years.
And good evening, I'm Ron Wilson. Also tonight, a win at last.
Chipperfield, and it's in for Australia.
But the Socceroos World Cup dream comes to an end.
We're proud. 4 years' time, we're in there.
Well, who would have thought at this time yesterday Australia was about to get a new Prime Minister? Let's go straight to Deb at Parliament House in Canberra. Deb, what a coup this has been for Julia Gillard.
Ron, it is a truly momentous day for Australia and one of the most sensational in our nation's political history. Julia Gillard is now our 27th Prime Minister and the first woman to lead our country. She has enormous challenges ahead. 10's political editor Paul Bongiorno begins our coverage.
Girls rule, the order of the day at Government House. Australia's first woman Governor-General swears in the nation's first female Prime Minister.
Prime Minister, I offer you my very warmest congratulations on this historic day.
No one more surprised than her partner Tim Matheson, flying into Canberra, champagne in hand.
Absolute shock, absolute shock. I was sitting watching TV last night, went, uh-oh.
Not as shocked as Kevin Rudd. A recent check of the numbers proving no protection. A tidal wave swept him from office with astonishing speed. He accepted the new mood and didn't contest.
New leader of the Federal Parliamentary Labor Party, elected unopposed, is Julia Gillard.
Wayne Swan jumped ship last night and won the deputy's job.
I came to that decision because I believed we needed a very clear and decisive outcome.
Mr Rudd warned caucus future leaders would be reluctant to embark on difficult reform if it meant unpopularity, a swipe at the factional plotters. He was devastated, but will recontest his seat and has offered to work in the Gillard ministry. He proudly and emotionally listed his achievements.
What I'm less proud of is the fact that I have now blubbered.
The political assassination of Kevin Rudd was brutal, swift and, in the end, surprisingly bloodless. The ruthless pragmatism gives Labor a dramatic circuit breaker and the chance of a fresh start.
We have lost our way, not delivered the kind of stability and certainty and good management that Australians would seek.
The opposition's very case, according to Tony Abbott.
She has vindicated our position.
Julia Gillard quickly repositioned the government on the mining tax, calling for a truce and pulling the taxpayer-funded ads.
I'm there, throwing the door of government open. I'm inviting the mining industry to walk through that door.
BHP responded immediately, as did others.
This is a ceasefire. This is a let's sit together and work through it, and I welcome it.
But the miners may not be so happy to hear the new Prime Minister is committed to an emissions trading scheme.
But first we will need to establish a community consensus for action.
That sounds like even more delay to the Climate Institute. Ms Gillard says she'll not take up residence in the lodge, waiting for the voters to install her there at the next election. A gesture her security detail may force her to reconsider. While she's proud to serve the nation in the top job and to be the first woman to do so, she denies vaulting ambition.
I didn't set out to crash my head on any glass ceilings. I set out to keep my feet on the floor.
Paul Bongiorno, 10 News.
And Paul joins us now. Paul, there have been leadership rumblings within the Labor Party for weeks now, largely because of the plummeting opinion polls. Did anyone really see this coup coming?
Well, Kevin Rudd suspected it was coming. He had his Chief of Staff go out and take soundings in the last couple of weeks. He reported back that even if there was a coup, Kevin Rudd was safe. Nobody really saw it coming yesterday. It was kept very tight. Only the factional warlords, if you like, knew what they were after, and Julia Gillard did too. They've been working on her for the last couple of weeks, trying to convince her that the party needed her. They won that argument yesterday.
Julia Gillard was a key member of the Rudd government, a member of the kitchen cabinet, as that core group was called. How is she going to be different from the Prime Minister?
Well, it is true, and she accepts responsibility for many of the decisions that were taken in the last 2.5 years, but she's Julia Gillard. She's not Kevin Rudd. She's a different personality. She has a different way of doing things, and she's had a lot of practice at being Prime Minister. The bureaucrats and others say that when she was in charge, things did seem to go a little bit more efficiently. Paperwork got through a bit faster, so that's how she'll be different.
Thank you, 10's political editor Paul Bongiorno, and we will cross to Paul a little later in the bulletin. But let's go to our senior correspondent Hugh Remington inside Parliament. Hugh, Kevin Rudd fell ultimately to a plot cooked up in the darkest backrooms of the Labor Party machine.
Well, that's right, Deb. The plotting might have gone on in the darkest areas of politics, but the murder itself happened in broad daylight. We saw an excruciating sight today. An elected Prime Minister brought down by his own side when he was still potentially in a winning position. We will now never know. What we saw was a brave, even a noble performance from Kevin Rudd today. He was a man who was plainly shattered to the core. Whatever their politics, no one wants to see a proud man reduced to this. His 3 children beside him, guided as always by a sympathetic wife, watched by equally shattered members of his staff, Kevin Rudd praised the very people who had so utterly deserted him and asked that they be re-elected.
They are a good team, led by a good Prime Minister. I mean, Julia, not me, because I'm still the Prime Minister, I think, for another quarter of an hour.
He spoke for 12 minutes of his pride at his reforms, but the silences were long and painful. Never more than when remembering his welcome to the stolen generation.
As Therese reminded me, that was a big day.
Labour's hero is now political dust. As he left the caucus meeting, where finally he resigned without a fight, Kevin Rudd's bewilderment was plain.
What do you reckon happened?
What happened was a backroom coup engineered by right-wing power brokers. Late into the night, while many Labour MPs were socialising at Parliament, oblivious to it all, the key plotters, including Parliamentary Secretary Bill Shorten, were hard at it, making the calls, sealing the coup. It was born, as usual, in both hope and fear. Fear that Kevin Rudd's catastrophic collapse in personal support was going to bring down Labour at the next election. Hope that Julia Gillard might make a difference and that she could be convinced to stand. Finally, she broke cover.
It was necessary for me to take this step to take control and to ensure that the government got back on track. I have obviously formed that view in recent days.
By this morning, all Labour MPs knew what they were about to do.
It's going to be very hard when we go into that caucus, and to see the caucus put the knife into the back of a Labor Prime Minister in his first term.
But they did it anyway. The astonishment, the shock at this historic political assassination sweeping both sides of Parliament.
A midnight knock on the door, followed by political execution, is no way that the Australian Prime Minister should be treated.
Late this afternoon, another huge shock. The 4th member of the so-called Gang of Four, the highly regarded Finance Minister Lindsay Tanner, announcing he is quitting politics. He will leave at the election.
There are, frankly, 2 little girls and indeed 2 older kids who need me more than the country needs me.
Australia has had 3 Prime Ministers in 3 years. The people will decide if we get a 4th. But when will they have their say?
In coming months, I will talk to the Governor-General about calling an election, and I won't give a more specific timeline than that.
Whatever the date, the landscape is utterly changed. And for this man, there can be no second coming. Hugh Remington, 10 News.